Cool people doing cool shit. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
My guest today is David Fink, former owner of the Acorn Theatre in Three Oaks, Michigan, and by my estimation, from conversation around the kitchen table last night, the liver of no fewer than 5 lives. So pick one or two of those lives today, and we'll talk about that.
Okay, I kind of divide my life into 3 acts, and I've finished my first 2, and I'm transitioning into Act 3. But I just do that because, theater,
right,
structure.
Yeah,
it's not really true. Things are transitions.
If you titled Acts 1 and 2, what would you title them?
Act 1 would be manufacturing. Well, there's, I'm not counting childhood. That's the preamble or preface. Manufacturing. Act 2 was the theater, the Acorn, and I sold that. So I'm transitioning into Act 3, which I hope will be my most productive.
Do you know what that's going to look like?
No. I know what I'm doing now, but I don't know really where my focus is going to be and where my energy is going to go. We'll see. I'm trying to figure it out.
You said last night, you said something in the car that struck me, and I can't remember exactly how you said it, but something about looking for a way to tie your ethics into whatever it is you do next.
Yeah, I want to kind of marry my ethics, my morals with my skill set, and figure out how to best use what I've learned in these first many decades of life and be productive and accomplish stuff. I say prayers every night, and I always pray that I find ways to contribute to the world. The world will be better because I was here. I want there to be a net present gain. And I think of that every night just to remind myself that how I want to live.
Have you always done that at night? I kind of do a similar thing in the morning. And I wonder, when you pray at night, do you also reflect as to whether or not you pulled it off that day, or not? You just move on.
Think about my intentions, my gratitudes, and I always pray for health for myself, my friends, and my family, and that's pretty much it. At one time in my life, I would think of all the people I knew that passed away and pray for them, but at a very early age, there were too many people, so that was the end of that.
What I wanted to ask you, you said you wanted to find a way to marry your ethics and morals into what you were doing. What are those ethics and morals, would you say?
Well, I guess my biggest desire right now is there's a lot of hatred, and I think that comes from fear, and I think that comes from trauma. People experience trauma, they get fear instilled, and then they blame others, they put hatred on. There's personally, anti-Semitism, homophobia are 2 big ones for me. So how do I battle that? And one of the things that I'm doing is I help start a storytelling show, LGBTQ plus storytelling show. When people hear, we all have the same emotional journeys. So when people hear these true personal stories, oftentimes they relate to the person as a human. My mother was going to the show regularly, and I said, "Mom, you went once, you don't have to keep going." She said, "No, it's like a window into a world I never knew existed." She said that she had always judged people strongly based on their appearance, but seeing trans people, seeing all sorts of people that she would, in her mind, think of as just being strange looking and dismissed, she said hearing their stories makes her feel like they have a lot in common that she never would have imagined. And so now she's far less judgmental based on appearance than she ever was before. She's in her 80s. And I thought, if I'm accomplishing that, that's a good job.
Yeah.
So, I've been touring with a group of musicians that are multicultural, and their goal is to take away fear of other through familiarity, through music and dance. And I totally buy into that concept.
That's a really noble reason to take that show on the road. What do you guys feel? How do you feel like you do with that? Like after the performance or whatever, does it feel like you made that impact that you wanted to make?
I would say yes. A lot of times we do Q&A. Sometimes I'd be the one kind of facilitating that. And also, we oftentimes talk about the different instruments, which are from different cultures, and especially with teens or young adults, they'd have a huge, well, everybody, but in particular, would have a huge curiosity and want to try the instruments. And I would just watch kind of their minds expanding as they play with new sounds, new tones, new musical expressions from different cultures. And it's really fun to watch their minds open and the enthusiasm kind of build. So, yeah.
And where did that show go? Or where did you go with that show?
My first tour with the group, we went to Vietnam, Spain, Portugal, and Senegal, Africa. And then since then, we've gone to Mexico twice, to Oaxaca area. And next year, we're planning a tour of India. We're currently fundraising for that.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it's really meaningful.
What is the name of the group?
It's called Surabhi Ensemble, and it's Chicago-based. But the core of the group is Arabic, flamenco, and Indian. And we have collaborators from all different cultures, most often Mexico and Africa. And a lot of times when we travel to different countries, we'll incorporate local musicians and maybe some local folk music and do it with our arrangements and our sounds, our mix. And music is music. You want to classify it in genres, but it'll just be music.
But how did you get involved with the group? Because you're not one of them playing the instruments, right?
No, I got involved because of the Acorn Theatre.
Oh,
Pretty
okay.
much everybody in the group are people that I've worked with many times through the years in various incarnations and groups and stuff. We got to be friends, and I got invited to go on this trip to kind of help them out. I would often drive, sometimes, like I'd say, conduct the Q&A or MC, just help with stuff, carry stuff, whatever. And I guess I was useful, so they keep asking me to participate and come along.
That's cool. Speaking of Acorn Theatre, theoretically, that's why we're here talking to each other. But
Yeah.
then it turns out we could have been talking to David about anything, because you have like so many interesting aspects of what you do. But how did you come to be the owner of the Acorn Theatre in Three Oaks, Michigan?
Well, sometime I guess it was probably the early to mid 90s, I got into a relationship with a guy named Kim Clark. And Kim was a writer, and he was very interested in, TV at the time, but I kind of got him into theater. And he went to work at Second City Comedy Group. And he became the head of all their writing programs. And when I met Kim, he was converting a burned out old farmhouse in Union Pier, Michigan, into a bed and breakfast. And I ended up buying out his partner. And we had this bed and breakfast, and there wasn't a lot to do in the area in the evening that didn't involve drinking. And Kim was sober, and we decided to do a variety show in the area. And we had all sorts of kind of artsy performers, including David Sedaris, who, when we booked him, he was not so well known. But by the time he was in the show, he was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. We had a lot of performers from Chicago, and we sold out all the shows, and people loved it. Realized there's an audience out here, and we could do smart stuff and interesting stuff, and people will come and enjoy it. And I didn't really like having the bed and breakfast. You had to be nice to strangers in the morning, which is uncivilized. And so we ended up selling the bed and breakfast and using that money to buy this burned out old farmhouse in Three Oaks, Michigan, and turn it into a performance space. And it just kind of organically grew into what it became and is becoming. So it wasn't really a plan. It just kind of happened, I guess. And it was a great part of my life. A lot of my favorite people are people I met through the Acorn. A lot of creative people are really fun to be around and interesting and good additions to my life. So it's been a great experience on that level. I've met so many people that I just love. And Super Happy Fun Time Burlesque, man, a lot of memories. There are a lot of memories that I didn't experience. I've heard stories, some of them I'm still hearing because I was asleep or not in the room when it happened. But
Yeah, I think that's how we met. Is I went there with Super Happy Fun Time for a New Year's Eve show, maybe. I think
probably.
even though we have several mutual friends like Ann and Greg, but yeah, that's how I met you, was at the Super Happy show. We drove down there in an unheated bus, and on New Year's Eve. That was fun.
Well, we always packed the house. You guys always packed the house, and it was a show and a party.
Yeah. Rachel, who's just off camera, you did Ariel at that show, didn't you?
Yeah, every New Year's Eve, I would drop. If David remembered to count down them.
Yeah, so many things to remember. But
Oh, that's right. The Rachel drop instead of the ball drop.
Right.
I forgot about that.
and then Joe in a diaper.
Yeah. So many photos of Joe's ass.
Kim was somebody I met through a personal ad on the Reader back when we were doing that. And he had been fairly recently divorced and come out as gay. And we were together for 22 years.
That's a long
And
time.
so it was a long, committed relationship. And he's the one that started the Acorn Theatre. We did it together, but he did the construction, and it was his vision, and I did the booking. So he created the space, I filled it. I booked the acts, I publicized, I tried to get audiences, did marketing, PR, all that stuff. And then after a couple of years, he kind of lost interest, and I kind of took over, and he did other stuff. But he was probably a genius, and a lot of my favorite people in my life came through Kim. And a lot of the best things in my life, and a lot of the worst pain, a lot of the biggest struggles came from that. So, he was a good choice for a period of time, but it shouldn't have gone on for 22 years. But I didn't know that then. It's only in retrospect that I look back and thought, it really should have ended. I should have ended it much earlier. And at one point I tried, and he talked me out of ending it. We just made changes. And that's when we sold the bed and breakfast and started the Acorn. And that was part of...
Wait, you said, I think this has run its course.
Yeah, I said,
We
why
should
don't you
break
keep the
up.
bed and breakfast? I'll keep my place in Chicago. Let's go our separate ways. He convinced me
And
to stay
instead you
together. We
opened
sold
the
the bed and
theater.
breakfast, opened a theater. Yeah.
Wow, he's a persuasive speaker to go from breaking up with me to I'll convince you to go in on a theater with me.
Yeah. When I decided that it was time to go our separate ways, I think that's around when his sobriety had ended.
Oh.
And so there was deception and lying and sneaking around and drinking and eventually using substances. And he went from this super smart, engaged, productive person to an adult, deceptive person with a different life. And I think lying often comes with addiction and alcoholism. And I felt like when I was splitting up, I had a lot of mantras. One of them was, don't get drowned by the drowning victim. One of them was break up with kindness, which is really, really hard to do. It's much easier to feel anger, but I felt like I owed it to both of us to try to be kind and, be the person I want to be, do the work it takes to be kind, but set boundaries and limits.
Back to the Acorn Theatre, was that a struggle at first? Because it was an old, used to be a factory, but also even being from just up the highway in Grand Rapids, Three Oaks doesn't look like a place where you're going to be able to fill that theater consistently.
Well, our audience wasn't Three Oaks. Our audience was, depending on the show, either the region or even national or international, because we had some people that had huge draws, and people would drive from Canada or Pennsylvania or Iowa or these far drives, and they'd say, I can't believe this person's so close. And I'd be like, I can't believe you consider this close.
Yeah.
But there's an intimacy at the Acorn that people didn't get really anywhere else. And so a lot of people would travel. And so we were in Three Oaks, but we weren't just for Three Oaks. That wasn't, Three Oaks is a town of less than 2,000 people. And we had 300 seats to fill.
Yeah.
So we had to draw from the region.
Yeah. When did you sell the Acorn, and why did you decide to sell?
Well, we opened in 2003, and we were for profit. Our initial plan was to have 2 shows a week, Friday and Saturday. They'd be 1, maybe 2-person shows, and we charged $15 a ticket, sell 100 tickets per show, and we'd cover our costs, and we wouldn't make any money, we wouldn't lose any money. That was our original business plan, but it didn't really work out that way. So we never really were able to break even. Went for 12 years, and I was going to shut down because just financially couldn't keep doing it. So I talked to a friend of mine that's very smart and successful, and he said, why don't you start a nonprofit? And so we did that, and immediately it was in the black because we got grants, we got donations. We didn't rely strictly on earned revenue, and immediately that made sense financially, but it also meant me giving up control, and that led to, I can't tell you how many headaches and how many unpleasant, unhappy experiences. And the nonprofit eventually bought the theater just within the last year, and they're running it, and I'm out. And I hope it seems like they're getting back to kind of the initial spirit. They're booking more like what I would say is creative, worthwhile acts, and not just things that are commercially viable that aren't necessarily interesting programming.
For those unfamiliar with that world, why would switching to nonprofit status mean that you lost any control?
Well, we have a board of directors, and they're in charge, and there's an executive director. I never wanted to ask people for money. I just wasn't willing. A lot of my friends and family donated, but not because I asked them. I just was not willing to do that for an organization that I was, where I would personally benefit.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if things were different in literally any way, not necessarily the nonprofit or not part, but do you think you would still be doing that, or was that always going to be like a finite period of your life and then you would do something else?
When we started the theater, we knew there wasn't a good exit strategy. So when the opportunity to sell it came up, I thought it's probably a smart thing for me. But realistically, I could have programmed till I was very old. I mean, it was something I enjoyed, and I think I was really good at it. And it's something I could continue well into old age. But, time for the next thing. I don't really want to dwell on what could have been. Mm-hmm. I want to look forward to what's next, figure out what's next, and get the enthusiasm and joy. And I'm a curious person by nature. So I'm curious about what's next and what can I do?
Well, what are you, other than the music project that you were just talking about, what are you like poking your fingers into currently?
Okay, what am I doing? I co-wrote a song with a guy named Jim Peterick. That song should drop soon, I hope. In my fantasy, it'll be used in like a montage in a rom-com, or the end credits of a movie, or like a Disney movie. I'd love to, but that's my fantasy. But I'd love for people to hear this song. It's kind of, the concepts are autobiographical. And so that's exciting. I joined a nonprofit board of an organization called Season of Concern. It started out raising money and giving it to theater professionals with HIV/AIDS. And then we expanded it to catastrophic health issues. And then with lockdown and theaters closed, we just raised money to give to needy theater professionals, and that's where we are now. So I'm on the board trying to help them raise money to give away to theater professionals in need. I helped start a storytelling show, it's LGBTQ plus stories. We're going to start our 10th year in August. That's really fulfilling and exciting. And we're doing it not just in our regular monthly spot, but also, like last month we did a show at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. We did a show at one of the Chicago Public Libraries. We did a show at suburbs. It's big. Our storytellers are getting shows in a lot of different places. And it's a fantastic use of my time and energy and experience. I'm on a committee to help create a story archive for the Chicago AIDS Garden, and I'm kind of in charge of that right now. So I'm trying to get people to submit stories for an archive from the beginning of AIDS until now. I call it an AIDS quilt made out of words. And if people want to pay tribute to a person, an organization, an event, hopefully this will be there for perpetuity. Right now it's online. And the idea for me is a good story translates to something bigger than just that story. And if you want to learn about life in a pandemic, which is topical, or stigma and disease, or government response to disease, or how people act in the face of adversity, good and bad. I mean, there's so many threads that you could get from these stories other than just specifically HIV/AIDS. Hopefully this will be a really good resource for people on all of those things.
Speaking of that, what was it like to be, I would imagine, during the AIDS crisis, you were a young man in your early 20s,
Yeah.
probably. What was that time like? Because I think I was a junior high kid, so I knew about it on the news, but it was an abstract thing.
Yeah, as I was kind of coming out in my early 20s, AIDS was also kind of appearing. And I heard about it the first time from a coworker whose sister had a blood transfusion giving birth, and she got AIDS and passed away. So that was the first I heard of it. And I came out playing on a gay softball team, and I have a story that's actually in the AIDS Garden archive about my team. My first softball team had 12 players plus a coach, and I described some of the players. And by the late 90s, around 2000, I decided to try to find these players. And out of the 13 people, the 12 players plus the coach, only 4 of us were still living. And although AIDS wasn't as prevalent in Chicago as many other places, it still just devastated a community and my network. By the time I was 30, I'd lost far more friends than my parents combined. And that's really when I stopped saying my nightly prayers, thinking of all the names, because there were way too many people that I knew that had passed away. I also, when I finished graduate school, I decided I wanted to do volunteer work and give back. And I ended up volunteering at a residential care facility for HIV-affected babies and young children. So that really just made everything so real. And that I have so many just vivid memories of that time and some of these kids and that experience. There's so much fear of getting sick, fear of dying. Every time I have a cough or a cold or flu or something, I was sure that I had AIDS and I was going to die soon. And then when COVID first came to the US, I remember I was at LaGuardia Airport flying back, it was before lockdown, and I just had this inner panic. I was sure that I was dying of COVID. And I thought, I don't have any symptoms. Why do I think I'm dying if I don't have symptoms? I thought, oh, this is muscle memory from the days of AIDS. I'm just flashing back in my fear-based inner body, inner mind.
How does it, because I was just thinking about that when you brought it up on your own, but the level in the early days of the COVID pandemic, the level of fear that just was on everything, and that I don't know if only you would know, not me. It seems like AIDS would be scarier than COVID ever could have been, but the fear that existed just with COVID, I can't imagine in the 80s when you were, where it probably felt a little bit like Russian roulette as to whether you're going to get hit or not.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of good comparisons. And I knew people that died of COVID fairly early on. Plus, I have a friend that lives in Wuhan. And so before COVID was in the US, when it was in China, I took up a little collection through social media, and friends would give me $5, $10, maybe $20. Ended up sending a few $1,000s to my friend, who then made videos of he and his wife in head-to-toe hazmat suits dropping bags of groceries in front of senior citizen neighbors' doors, knocking on the door, and then stepping back and filming the neighbor, receiving the food. And they'd say, "This is from our friends in the United States." And the old people would be crying because somebody cared about them, somebody's trying to take care of them. It was just profoundly human connection. And I was so proud to be a part of this, and that so many of my friends were generous and contributed. And then once COVID was here, our energy and efforts were, we have to take care of ourselves in our circle. Mm-hmm. So it was, some people didn't feel it. I felt it strongly and closely with family members and lifelong friends.
Did it feel about the same, or was one more anxiety-inducing than the other?
Well, I'd say with AIDS.
I mean, you've also grown since the '80s as a person, so maybe your perspective would be different too. I don't know.
I'd say AIDS had far more stigma.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
But there was some stigma with COVID. Like, I had a classmate that she and her mother passed away long after vaccines were out, but they never got vaccinated for political reasons. And, some people would, there was a lot of stigma around vaccines and around people's behavior, and did they take unnecessary risks, and how do you judge that? Mm-hmm. And, there's a sense sometimes of, did they deserve to get COVID? Did they deserve to get AIDS? And I don't believe in deserve for disease. Deserve is a moral judgment. Disease is a natural occurrence. Mm-hmm. And so why are you being so punitive?
Well, I noticed that during COVID, even from people that I would never have expected this from, there was like, I wouldn't say punitive necessarily, but there was some pretty harsh judgment when it turned out so-and-so got COVID. And that was in the first year before, because eventually everybody got it, and then voila, the stigma disappeared. But when it was possible for it to just be other people that got it, there was a lot of judgment about what stupid thing you must have done because you picked up COVID. And I thought that was silly on a number of levels, but mainly it seemed to be all of the friends who were actually being really careful about it that got sick in those earlier days.
Oftentimes, yeah. Also, like, I knew some people that were trying to be helpful, and they told me ways that I could get vaccinated before it was my turn. And I wouldn't do, and I think it kind of hurt their feelings that they were going out of their way to try to help me get vaccinated, and I didn't take advantage of it. I waited till it was my turn, and then when it was my turn, I went and got my vaccines. But I just, I'm not trying to judge them, but for me, ethically, I'll do it when it's my time.
Yeah.
And then I'll do it. And that's what I did. But I had some friends on social media that were just panicking that I was getting injected and that I was hurting myself, and there was so much fear. I have a cousin that was the head of U.S. response to COVID for a while. So I had a really good informational resource in my family, and that was a really nice thing. It's not like I got information everybody else didn't have, but I could certainly turn to somebody and say, hey, what's the story right now?
Uh-huh.
And he has a podcast that I listen to, and but I got a lot of information through him in the media. He was on TV a lot, and his podcast.
Well, that probably also, I mean, you don't seem like a particularly worry-prone person unnecessarily. But if you were, having someone in that position would at least help you know whether to get on the bandwagon of people panicking about it or not, if that was legit or not.
Yeah, it was a science-based.
Mm-hmm.
A person with great resources for science.
Mm-hmm.
And what I had said on social media was, look, I've been vaccinated my whole life against things, and why are you choosing? One of the people that was concerned had open heart surgery. I'm like, science saved your life.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you choosing this one thing? And then I know why, but it was pretty upsetting.
It definitely brought out some stuff within friends and family dynamics that you wouldn't expect.
I'll say I think most people were well-meaning. Whatever they said, it wasn't meant to hurt me. It was meant to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Did you get it, though? Did you get COVID?
I got COVID at least twice.
Oh, man.
I might have had it before we knew it was in the U.S. because I got really sick. And after COVID came to the U.S., I started thinking, I wonder if that's what I had. I'll never know. But when I did have it, I was already vaccinated and it wasn't horrible for me. But I did lose my sense of taste and smell for a little while. But I'm not really a big eater, and food is food, so so be it.
So you have no idea that you took us to such an awesome Asian restaurant last night. Then, if food is just food, you don't even know. That was an amazing meal.
Food's about the company.
Yeah,
mostly.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
But I will say you were an adventurous orderer. I'll give you kudos for taking a chance.
I did. Yeah, I had to draw the line. There was a couple of things there like, well, I don't want to have to throw it away. So I think that might be across the line. But, it's good to try stuff. Like you've said in various ways already while we've been sitting here, going out beyond what you currently know and pushing.
I believe strongly in that. Like I say, I'm a curious person. I've eaten insects in various forms. Mm-hmm. Sometimes unknowingly. I like to try stuff. Within reason.
Yeah.
I made a vow to myself. It started with improv classes with the concept of yes and then I took it to Burning Man, then I took it to life. And I just made a vow. If somebody gives me an opportunity to do something I've never done before, I have to say yes and do it unless it's illegal, dangerous, disgusting, or I can't afford it. Then I have the option but not requirement of saying no. And that's my guideline. And it served me, and there are things I thought I would hate and I did hate. But there are things I thought I'd hate that changed my life for the better.
What's an example of one of those things?
I was at a charity event and I often at silent auctions would bid on stuff just to get the bidding started. Mm-hmm. And I was at an event and one of the auction items was the opportunity to be in an operating room and watch an open heart surgery. And I was the only bidder and I won it. So for $50, I got to scrub in and go into the operating room, stand next to an anesthesiologist right over the patient's head and watch an open heart surgery. And I'm squeamish. And I tried to prepare for it by watching operation shows on TV, but I couldn't, especially before bed. Tried to think, imagine, but it was disturbing to me. And I thought, well, I should not do this because I'm squeamish. But I thought, I don't think it's disgusting. It's not illegal or dangerous, so I have to do this. And it was fascinating. One of the surgeons was Dr. Seinfeld, was Jerry Seinfeld's cousin. Yeah. And I got to ask, once the patient was on the heart-lung machine, there were two anesthesiologists, and one of them said I could ask questions. And it was fascinating. And the surgery was so precise and they were so good. I thought if I needed the surgery, I'd love for this team to do it. But the patient was obese, and they gave me the patient's history. And I said, does everybody have like fat on their heart like this? And they said, everyone has some, but this is really excessive. And I saw how hard it was for them to harvest veins and all sorts of ramifications of the obesity. And I looked around the room, and none of the medical professionals were obese. And I left, and I was 40 years old at the time. I left the operating room and went right to the gym. And I've worked out regularly since then, because I can't necessarily prevent the heart attack, but I wouldn't have to have anything as invasive as what this guy went through by watching my weight and watching my health. So it changed my life for the better in that way.
If you're squeamish, like that's an amazing thing that you said. Well, no, the criteria for saying turning it down doesn't exist. So
what saved me was it's not a bloody surgery.
Oh,
it's really clean. You would think that hearts pump blood, so there's going to be, like in my visualizing and trying to prepare, I envision like blood spurting all over the place, like a horror film.
Oh, right.
And it's not like that at all. I mean, they're constantly cauterizing, and it's a super clean workspace. And what was strange to me is they stopped the heart by pouring ice on it. Like, that's kind of low tech.
Yeah.
And they tried to start again by putting warm water on it.
That's kind of funny.
I think there's some chemicals in the water.
Oh.
Yeah. There might have been chemicals in the ice, I don't know. But really, it was basically temperature and not anything, it's just so basic, so simple.
Yeah. Years ago, one of my clients was a cancer hospital, and only one time they had me go in to shoot a surgery, and I'm not squeamish, and I did fine, but it still was a very I think what I was in there for was a woman was having a double mastectomy, and I guess it would be the same with any surgery, but I wasn't squeamish about the surgical nature or the blood or anything like that, but I had struggled with the reason why she was in there in the first place. That was tough, and didn't make me physically squeamish, but definitely made that a difficult thing
empathy.
to sit through.
I have a friend that does special effects, and he does all sorts of cool things. And for a while, he was making body casts, and a number of women that were going to have mastectomies would have him cast their breasts so they'd have a record.
Oh, right.
But I don't think any of them ever picked up their cast. It's like they wanted it made, but then they didn't want it. And he would just, whatever they wanted, that's what he would do. But I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a strange relationship with my body where I feel like I'm kind of this thing floating up here, kind of amused by this crazy body that experiences all sorts of weird things in this planet. I kind of dissociate from my body a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that helpful or not?
It's just how I'm built. I don't know if it's helpful or hurtful. Like most things, there's probably positives and negatives. It's just duality of life and nature.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the same, but what I do is just pretend nothing's happening. No, that's probably nothing.
Yeah, it'll go away.
Eventually that'll kill me, but so far it's worked.
Yeah, I'm pretty oblivious to my body for the most part, and when I go for my checkups, the doctor asks about myself, I'm like, I don't know. Something has to be really catastrophic for me to notice.
Yeah.
When did that start? I don't know. Well, a month ago, a year ago, a week, I don't know.
I don't want to push you in directions you don't want to go, but you talked a little bit about the softball team, but like being someone who wasn't there, I would be like interested in what life, like for real, what life was like when this specter of AIDS was hanging over everything, and also at a time when being who you are was not nearly as okay as it is now.
I will say there were all sorts of things. One thing, as being gay became more mainstream and normal and accepted,
And when would you say that happened?
it's still, in process, but I'd say to me, in my mind, the tipping point was when celebrities came out as gay. I'll say, Ellen DeGeneres was a big one. Rosie O'Donnell was a big one. There were just a number of people that you've kind of felt like you sort of knew, even though you didn't. And there were gay characters. I think Will and Grace had a big impact. But when you were seeing gay faces in the media, and it wasn't fear and negative based, that really helped things change quite a bit. But as that happened, like there's something really exciting about doing something naughty and subversive and transgressive. And so being part of that naughty underground, there was a thrill to that I think is somewhat gone. It's healthier this way, but it was exciting that way.
Do you miss that, or do you find
Yeah.
that you still try to instill that in the way you live?
I don't think of it as being that naughty, and I kind of wish I did in a way.
Oh,
Yeah, there was a real excitement and adrenaline rush for certain things, and also it seemed like I don't know, people now I think are less interactive physically. People meet through apps and not in person so much, and there's so much sexuality in just available on your phone or the internet and stuff like that. I don't know. I think that the in-person connection and flirting, a lot of flirting isn't going on because, maybe it's good with a lot of the, trying to be respectful.
Right.
But also, there's something nice about compliments and, some flirtiness. Yeah, I don't know. I miss some of that. But I don't miss the fear of disease and death that was so prevalent
yeah.
and so part of our daily lives.
You grew up in a time when that would have had to be kind of underground. But when did you know that you were gay?
It was interesting. I started fooling around a little bit when I was in my teens, but I didn't identify as gay until after college. In college, I dated women, had some really great girlfriends that, if I was straight, I probably would have wanted to marry one of them. They were really, just great people, still friends with them. But I took a family trip to Europe, and then I stayed in Europe by myself for a little bit. And all I wanted to do was find gay sex. And so when I came back, I thought, okay, I think I'm gay. And it's not just experimenting or, I have an opportunity and I'm horny, so I'm going to do this. But it's actually something that I want and I'm going to try to seek out. So that's when I started my journey to try to figure out about gay life, because I didn't know any gay people as far as I knew.
Oh.
And I joined this gay softball team. I broke up with my girlfriend. Decided to try to learn. And I tried to learn safely. I was skinny, I was young, and I looked really young. And people tended to be kind of predatory. This is going to sound bad, but I would get hit on by Catholic priests kind of a lot. It just, I don't know, I must have given off a vibe of, innocent that predators tended to like. So the softball world was a place where I felt comfortable and safe, and I had people around me that were protective. And I was around sport. I was never an athlete, but I was around sports my whole life. And so to me, it seemed like a kind of a safe entree to be around gay people. it was non-sexualized, it was athletic, and it was camaraderie, and it was teams, and it was cooperation, and that was my way in. It was a process. It wasn't like it just happened.
Right.
It was step by step by step.
And was that once you, because when are we talking? Like,
So this is the
years are
early
those?
to mid 80s.
Okay.
So I'm 63 right now.
Okay.
So I was coming out, started when I was 22, 23, really.
And, to me, in early 80s, the softball team itself sounds like pretty out and proud and clearly public. But generally, once you knew that about yourself, were you always pretty open about it, or did you have to stay closeted?
I chose to stay closeted. I worked in an industry that was very traditional. I didn't totally hide who I was, but I also didn't put it out there. And a lot of it was because I'm an introvert by nature. I force myself to be outgoing and social, but sometimes it's really draining to this day. And so I was just kind of quietly living my life and trying to figure things out. And it wasn't that I was necessarily ashamed. It was just that I learned to compartmentalize really early on in life. And it's, again, a thing that may have hurt me and really helped me in a lot of ways. But I still have that ability to put things into little boxes and file them away. And so that's what I did. I had lots of little lives, and sometimes they overlapped, sometimes they didn't. But in my 20s, I came out to family and friends, but I wasn't like coming out to strangers or anything like that. That happened more with the Acorn, and when I was in a relationship with Kim, he was much more out, and he was very verbal about it. So I said he had gay Tourette's. So always outing himself and always outing me. All right. So that's really, the theater's when I really was publicly out. And then with OUTspoken, it's a whole show with gay themes. So
I don't think since cameras started rolling, you've talked about OUTspoken, or you didn't name it at that, if that's what you were talking about earlier.
OUTspoken's the LGBTQ plus theme storytelling show.
Oh, okay.
I started it with Art Johnston, and we had a woman named Kim Hunt, who she and Art were the co-hosts, and I was the curator, and I had the vision for how the show was gonna look and be. And I decided very early on, from the very first show, that we want to record all the episodes in case we ever just have an archive of it. Some of them are now on a podcast. And I said I want the show to be really inclusive. I want everything under the LGBTQ plus umbrella to be represented in the show to the best of my ability. So I actively sought out people of various ethnicities, of proclivities, ages, gender identities, sexual identities, physical attributes. Tried to have, the only thing that I really tried to find and failed was I really wanted to find a gay Holocaust survivor. And I reached out to the Holocaust Museum back then and tried to network because I knew a number of survivors. And basically I was told that if you were gay and you were liberated from the camps, you went to jail, and the gay people really didn't survive. So they may have survived the camps, but they didn't survive the war, let's say. And so finding an out gay survivor is very, very, very challenging, especially looking
I didn't even
in
think
Chicago.
about that they got liberated from the camps and then just got carted off to a different camp run by somebody else.
Yeah. I was just watching a documentary about it that my friend Lisa recommended about El Dorado nightclub, which happened to be the theme of the OUTspoken show we did at the Holocaust Museum last month. And El Dorado was a club that Cabaret is based on.
Oh.
And at that time in Germany, in Berlin, people had a lot of freedom to express openly at a club like El Dorado, their sexuality, their gender. And then with Hitler, he kind kind of took away that freedom and punished it. And that's when everything changed. But yeah, there are times when in the past where it was much more free than, a lot of things that are going on right now. And it's a struggle and it's a battle, and you think you're gaining ground and then you lose some ground. Hopefully over time things move in the right direction according to my values, but it's it's still battles and still a process.
It seems to be sort of on a pendulum that swings constantly back and forth.
But I hope it goes like this and like this.
Yeah,
and like
I hope
this,
so
and
too.
like this, and I think with younger generations, it's some changes happen generationally.
Yeah, like last week was a rough set of backward steps.
Supreme Court.
Yeah. And I don't want to be cynical and think that it would get worse, but a lot of that stuff feels like a slightly more desperate grab than would normally happen, because those guys know that they're about to die off generationally, and
Right.
the young kids absolutely are coming hardcore the other way because they don't even care.
A lot of it is what I talked about earlier about fear and
Yeah.
familiarity. Through the media, we have familiarity. And like I grew up not knowing any out gay people, but now I can see them all over the place in life and in the media, and it's even like in Three Oaks, it's just this small farm town. They have pride stuff, and
Yeah.
somebody came up to me. We had gay nights at the Acorn, unofficial, but nights where a lot of gay people would come. Local Three Oaks people came out, and had a friend say, "I can't believe it. You made it normal to be gay in Three Oaks." I'll say I didn't make it normal, but we're part of that movement, and now there's pride. So, last couple of years, cool.
That is cool. I noticed
Also, with the adversity, it tends to galvanize people. Like with AIDS, gay men and women came together.
adversity or diversity. What did you say?
Facing adversity, people
yes.
would come together, and
Yeah.
your allies would galvanize.
Yeah.
And gay men and gay women really started to interact a lot more because of fighting AIDS. We're less segregated, and as our governments do things to try to make it be punitive regarding gender and sexuality, people get together to be allies, and having a common enemy is one of the best things for creating a movement. So thank you in some ways. And maybe it'll add some more naughtiness and make sex hotter. Make sex hot again. Make it naughty again.
I don't know why exactly this reminded me of this, but somebody said years ago, probably when I was an art student, but as an obvious art collector, as I look around here, with that backwards step that the Supreme Court just took, like you just said, the silver lining or the accidental thank you is, years ago someone said that art is always of higher quality during conservative administrations because you
have something to push against.
Because there's something to push against, and then it kind of goes flat during the more progressive years because it's a little cushy.
But think of all the great artists we lost because of HIV/AIDS.
Right.
Lost way too young, and what work they could have done had they lived. I don't know. It's huge losses. Huge losses.
When we leave here, we're going to go grab coffee probably quick with my grad school professor and his husband. And I think he's probably exactly your same age. And it just, the way he describes the 80s and the not only just close personal friends, but just the other creatives that he knew, it sounds like, I always picture like he was the little drummer boy in a Civil War battle, and then all of a sudden he looks around and he's the only one left, because they all just dum, 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 dum.
Yeah. I think it was Fran Lebowitz was talking about, not only did we lose all these great creative people, but also the tastemakers and the critics and the people that would discern what was really good and worth discovering. You lost that generation also. So the art that we were seeing was really more second rate, which maybe, I don't know. I don't know what we didn't get to experience or see. But I felt like AIDS was anti-Darwinian. It was demise of the fittest. Like the best looking, the smartest, the funniest, the most athletic guys, the guys that you really want to sleep with seem to be the first ones to go. And those of us who were not necessarily like the most attractive got to get off the bench and play in the game. So
That's a dark and hilarious way to describe the AIDS epidemic.
describe me.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think about that though. Yeah, I suppose you're right.
Yeah.
Because those guys have no problem. So, of course, statistically, they are higher risk of getting sick anyway, which gives you an opportunity. And then it sounds like you came in and were a cleanup hitter.
I'm just so lucky that I'm here and healthy. I mean, I can't figure out why or how that happened, but I'm thankful, I'm grateful. And I'm trying to document or get people to document stories because it's important and collective memory is important and sharing our stories is important and history not repeating itself can come from these stories. There's so many reasons these stories are important. So I'm trying to help document, and any help you can provide with getting stories is appreciated. And the offer to videotape was very kind and generous. And if I have a need, I will certainly ask, because the better an archive we could create, the better a resource everybody will have.
Yeah.
So let's try to get people to, a lot of people want to do it, they just, I don't know if they don't take the time to sit down, or they're not comfortable with their writing abilities or their speaking abilities, or they fear that they're not going to do it justice. But I hope people will contribute. Well, I met with a group that's working with high school and college students that are interested in HIV/AIDS, and a group of them is a project. We're willing to interview people for the story archive, and I tried to hook up some people that weren't comfortable writing or telling a story but would be happy to be interviewed. I tried to hook up these students with some of those people. So far I haven't received any of those stories, but I'm hoping they will happen.
And when did you start doing that again?
The story archive?
Yeah.
It's got to be about 2 years, I'd say.
And the story archive is different than OUTspoken.
Yeah, the story archive is part of the Chicago AIDS Garden.
Yeah.
If you Google Chicago AIDS Garden story archive, you could look at it online. OUTspoken, you could Google. It's a live storytelling show monthly, first Tuesday every month, at a bar called Sidetrack in Chicago. And there's a podcast with some of those stories. Some people videotape their stories at OUTspoken and put them on YouTube. But OUTspoken doesn't keep videos of the stories. We keep audio of the stories.
Oh.
And hopefully more of them will end up podcast at some point.
What's next for you then?
That's a good question. Right now I'm putting a good amount of time and energy in Season of Concern and OUTspoken in the storytelling archive, hoping to do stuff with the song. I'm also traveling while I still have the mobility. And I also realize that I tend to have a lot of anxiety because I live in the future and it's really busy in my head. When I travel, I live in the present. And so travel's been really good, like calming for me. So right now, when I can do it, I'm trying to do a bit of traveling. And I know a lot of people, a lot of places. So I have a lot of times places to stay and people to show me around. I'm trying to take advantage of that. With quarantine, I didn't get to see a lot of people. So now I'm trying to make up for that a little bit. And I want to figure out, really, I wish I knew how much money I need to survive for the rest of my life. But I'm trying to figure out, really, how am I going to be the most productive over the next, say, 20 years, when I think I can still be productive, before I think, all right, now it's time for me to do a little more kicking back. Have a weird life.
I would say fascinating, interesting, weird to some people, but do you want their life?
I think nobody has a better life than me. People have different lives. Nobody's is better because I kind of like the way I'm living.
Uh-huh.
Like I said many times, I'm curious and I'm getting the chance to experience different things. And to me, that's fascinating and great. I feel like I'm like a basic person with an extraordinary life, like Mickey Mouse or Kermit the Frog, where you're like this kind of level, stable person with all this zaniness around them. And I get to kind of witness it. Some of it I get to experience vicariously. But I've gotten to be around so many great, cool things and great, cool, interesting people. And it really enriched my life and enriches my life.
Do you think that that is something that you would have come to naturally, or do you think that that is an effect and then a snowballing effect of adopting the yes and as
It's
a
who I
philosophy?
am and my decisions. And one of my nightly prayers is that I make good decisions, because my decisions are something I can control to a large extent. And I decided to try to explore opportunities and new things. And that's a decision. And it's also my basic nature. And I think that, I mean, when I was a kid, I used to try various foods. We'd go to a restaurant and I would order things my parents couldn't imagine anybody eating, but I was curious. So I think it's just my nature. And my brother and sister, not like that at all. They love familiar. They love familiar. I like trying stuff.
They're going to get old a lot faster.
Like
than
I've been a
you
Burning
are.
Man 13 times. I don't think they could imagine ever going. It would have no interest to them. Whereas for me, oh my God, this is a whole new world. This is so many things to discover. This is so much fun.
And you still, as someone who's been to Burning Man as many times as you have, you've certainly seen it change over the years. Is it still worth going to?
Oh yeah. If you want to see what it was like in the early years, just go really early. And when it's just starting to build for that year.
Oh.
And you get a good feel for what it was like. And I was not there in the early days. I think I started in 1998 or 1999. So it had been going on for a while before I first came. But I think there were about, maybe 15,000 people then. Now 80,000. But you can still get that spirit, that feel, that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't go for the party. I just go for the creativity.
The sculptures and stuff?
Sculptures, performance, whatever, interactions. I was part of a camp called Interaction Cafe, and people would come by and we had tables and chairs, and instead of having menus with food, we had menus with different interactions. And I'd be the waiter. I'd either interact with you or I'd facilitate an interaction. But as an introvert, it was a great way for me to kind of be around people. And I loved doing that. It was so much fun. And I have so many stories of weird interactions and stuff. It was crazy.
Like, give an example of what someone would order if you came up to their table.
All right. A woman came by and she was, I think I was probably in my, I don't know, maybe late 40s. She was probably mid 50s. In really good shape, athletic looking. Just a normal woman with a athletic body. And I gave her the menu. I said, today I have some specials. One of my specials was a breakup. I said, it's like vegetarian food. You may not crave it, but it might be really good for you right now. I'll break up with you. She said, I'm going to order that. I said, okay, what's your name? Donna? Donna, it's not you, it's me. We've been growing and we're kind of growing in different directions. And I found there's some things I need to explore, and I need to explore them on my own without you. So maybe we'll get back together someday, maybe not. But I've got my own path I have to go on. So thank you for our time together. Go and have a good burn. You're free and unencumbered. And she was just kind of smiling and bemused. And then we ended up having this long, long conversation. She was a Burning Man contemplating getting a divorce. And we had this long talk, and I'm not a therapist, but I said, hope you don't mind me asking questions, but why do you want to get divorced? Well, I've been with my husband a long time. The kids are grown. He's not dirty, but he's a little sloppy. and I want to travel. He doesn't really want to travel. He says I should do it with my friends, but I want to do it with him. I'm like, those don't seem like end of marriage issues. It seems like maybe therapy might be the next step instead of divorce. I said, what do you envision your life like after divorce? Oh, I'd have lots of sex with all these hot young guys. Would you find that fulfilling? Oh, not really sure. And how are you going to meet these guys? I don't. You think that that's going to give you a better life? And she just, she left. I have no idea what happened afterwards, but just the way my mind works, I had all these kind of real life questions about the fantasy of divorce versus being single, a single woman in her 50s, trying to reimagine her life. Would she be creating a better life for herself, or maybe not? Mm-hmm. Is the fantasy a good fantasy, or just best left a fantasy? I can't answer. I don't know what's best for. I don't know her. I don't know whatever happened. We probably talked for like 45 minutes, and it started with this kind of silly, interaction that led to deep conversation. That happened often.
I think it's funny that you have mentioned several times about being an introvert, and yet over and over the stories that you tell are about you like being the MC, or you are leading the Q&A, or now you're on the menu at the Interaction Cafe.
Well, I was a salesman. I mean, I've done things forever. When I went to college, my personal goal was to get better social skills, make new friends, develop social skills. I work hard at it. And being an introvert doesn't mean you can't talk to people. It just means it's draining.
Right.
But I do it. Like if I'm at a party, sometimes I step outside and just be by myself for 15 minutes, breathe, kind of gather myself, go back in the party and high energy and friendly, outgoing. It's not my nature, but it's something I can do. And when I'm with people that I'm comfortable with, like old friends, I'll say the most inappropriate things. If I think it's funny, I'll just say it a lot of times. And oftentimes I'm really funny, but I'm the only one that thinks so.
That's the price of being funny, though. You have to be able to be the only one.
I amuse myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'd say I'm an outgoing introvert.
I think that's where I land too. I noticed recently that I have a tendency to absorb some of the personality of the person I'm partnered with. And when that person was an introvert, I thought for years I was an introvert, like complete introvert. And it's just that they didn't want to, they were, I wasn't. And now I'm remembering again that I actually like people, but I need to get away from them to recharge. So I think that still lands me on the introvert side, but I actually really like going out and meeting people. It's not where I get my energy from, but I love doing it.
During lockdown, I really found I love being home alone. I probably wrote 70 pieces, I'd say at least, since the beginning of lockdown. And I've just decided recently and started to write time on my calendar to be alone. I'm scheduling alone time on my calendar to force myself to do that. And I'm not going to use it watching Netflix. I'm going to try to find ways to be present with myself and not filled with stimuli, and really give myself some alone time, force myself to do it.
Have you started doing that yet?
I started writing times on my calendar. I haven't actually had a solo date yet.
It was supposed to start yesterday when we arrived. That's a genius plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Every time I turn Age That Ends in Zero, I write an essay about my lessons of the last decade. One of my big lessons in my 50s was boundaries and limits, and I learned it through Kim and his substance issues. Life is not fair.
Yeah.
That's one of my big life lessons. But I do believe in kind of the karma, in that, like, if you are a liar, you probably go through life unable to trust other people. Therefore, you can't have good, solid, fulfilling relationships. So that's the kind of karma that I believe in. It's like your limitations limit you. So you're going to, like, I knew somebody who was sure people were going to dislike him, so he made sure they disliked him because then it was on his terms.
Oh,
So he still ended up alienating people, but it's because he decided to.
oh.
And I just watched it going, yeah, you're bringing on your own results.
Yeah. But that way he can say, aha, I told you so.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. This has been amazing.
Thanks for being interested in a basic person
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
doing cool shit.
The last 90 minutes of video and audio contradict that.
Just be dead air.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for being interested in my life and things I have to say. I appreciate it. I hope people watch it. I hope people watch it, and I hope they like it, and it's beneficial in some way.
They will.
Okay.
And thank you.
You're so charming.